Hey everybody. I probably won't get a chance to do a live today, but I did want to just do a quick pre-recorded message. Um, my grandfather on my dad's side would have been 104 years old today. So in his honor, I wanted to maybe tell a story or two about some of his stories he liked to tell because he was an amazing storyteller. You know, I write books for a living, and I'm pretty sure I get the storytelling gene from both of my grandfathers. They were both awesome storytellers. So here's one from my dad's dad, which I called him Grampy. Grampy told me, he grew up on a farm. I think he was one of 9 siblings. One of 9, if I remember correctly. And he told me this story about how one of his jobs as a kid, I think he was around, sorry, Jasper's bumping my arm. I think he was around like 10. I think he was, if I remember what 10, 12, somewhere in there. Sorry. I apologize. He was probably around 10, 12, somewhere in there. And he told me this story about how when he was that age, one of his jobs was to, in the morning, like I said, he grew up on a farm. And one of his jobs was to feed the mule every morning. So he would get up in the morning, go out to the corral, the mule would be there waiting. He'd, give him his feed or whatever and go on to his next job. Well, he said one day the neighbor came down, which the neighbor was not a close neighbor, it's like a mile or two up the road. He said that the neighbor came and said that every morning, sorry, Jasper keeps bumping me. He said that, or every night their mule was coming down there and eating his oats. And he said that, my grandfather said that he told the neighbor, he said, that's not possible. He said, because every morning when I go out there to feed the mule, he's there. So the neighbor said, I'm telling you, it's your mule coming up there eating my oats every morning or every night. So my grandfather said that one morning, just by chance, he happened to wake up early, so he decided to go ahead and go out there and feed that old mule. He said, when we got out to the corral, the mule wasn't there. And he said, before he could even, think to go and tell his dad or whatever, he hears hooves, the sound of hooves, and he looks up, and here comes that old mule trotting down the lane, and hopped right back into the corral like he was never gone. So it was his mule going down there eating the neighbor's oats and then coming back home. So that was one story he always told that made me laugh. And he had so many. There was another one. This was when my dad and his siblings were growing up. Grampy said that he was in his workshop, I think. He said doing some work, he liked to do welding and things like that. And he said they had this little dachshund named Peanut. And Peanut was out with the kids, and he said that the kids were out there running around playing, and all of a sudden he heard Peanut just raising Cain. And he said he looked out there, and he said all 5 of those kids and plus their friends were out there trying to get past Peanut, and he was running in front of them, showing his teeth and snapping at them and everything else, not letting them go past him. Well, my grandfather got up, he got mad. He thought the dog was trying to bite the kids. He said Peanut had been known to be ornery, but he had never been ornery with the kids. Well, he said, so he goes out there, he's stomping out there fixing to give that dog a piece of his mind, when all of a sudden he notices that when Peanut's running in front of the kids, he keeps stopping every now and then and turning around and going back to this one spot in the field and then running back at the kids to make them stop. He said when he got out there, he said Peanut had cornered a rattlesnake. He said he didn't know how that dog didn't get bit. But he said after that, he said he got a shovel and killed the snake, and he said that, Peanut was protecting those kids. He said after that, Old Peanut he said he got a steak for supper that night. I said, I'd imagine he did. I'm trying to think of, maybe another one that he would tell us. He had an old saying that he would always say, if we were looking for something and it was right in the spot it's supposed to be in and we just overlooked it, he'd say, do you live around here or ride a bicycle? I thought that was something he'd made up until I Googled it, and it's an actual saying. He grew up in the hills of Kentucky, and apparently it's an actual phrase there. And there's so many stories that he loved to tell that I want to make sure I pass on to my own kids. He was an amazing man. And from what I hear, he was a very well-known mechanic in his area. He said, my dad told me that people would come from miles around just to have him work on their car. He was a good, every one of his kids speaks very highly of him and his grandkids. And then, to me, that says something about a person. My aunt, one of my dad's sisters, she never actually had biological children, but she raised 2 boys that were her stepsons. And in my family, we don't use the word step, adopted, half, nothing like that. And biologically, my grandparents only had 8 grandkids, but if you ask them, they'd tell anybody they had 10, because those 2 boys, we've never looked at them as step cousins, and it's partly thanks to my grandparents' teaching. The way they raised their kids and our kids. Family was about love. Or is about love. And I'll tell you another one about my grandfather. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of going a little all over the place, but I'm trying to keep it on him. So my grandfather fell towards the end of his life. He lived to be, I believe he was 76 when he passed away. He'd be 104 today. But he fell and, had to have, he broke his arm and his hip when he fell. And the anesthesia they put him under, they said that it was like it advanced his Alzheimer's by 10 years, except he really didn't have Alzheimer's. It was just his medications made it seem like he did. So anyway, I remember going in there at one point. My sister and I went down there to visit. And, usually we go with my parents because it's 500 miles. They lived in Florida. We live in North Georgia. But this time it was just my sister and I went down to visit. And my grandfather had sent me the money to buy a car. My grandparents, I should say, had sent me the money to buy me a car. And the agreement was, if it was over $5,000, they'd give me $5,000 towards the car. If it was under $5,000, they'd just buy it. We got it right at $5,000. It was a '93 Lumina, and I loved that car. Anyway, I wanted to take the Lumina down there to show him because we knew he didn't have much longer. But so when we got down there, we went in the hospital room because he was still in the hospital from having that surgery, and he was taking. I can't really do it because I got my phone in my hands, but he was taking his straw and he's holding his straw in one hand and he's doing like this with the other. He said, we asked him, we said, Grampy, what are you doing? And he said, checking oil on my airplane. I just flew in. That man never flew an airplane in his life. And then another time, we were trying to feed him, and at first he didn't remember us, because my grandmother asked him, she said, do you remember who these girls are? And he said, he kind of leaned over to us, those the girls that live next door? We were like, no. She said, and she told him no. She said, she always called him Daddy. No, Daddy. These are these are Larry's girls. Well, a little while later, he still didn't exactly remember who we were, even though she told him he'd forgotten already. And we were trying to get him to eat. And he didn't want to eat. And my sister was still trying to convince him that he needed to eat something, and he didn't want to eat. And he called her by name. Said, now, to her, and he said, I'm going to call Larry and tell on you. She said, oh, so when you're mad, you know who I am. And here's just one last story. It's one of my favorites. He always would joke. He'd always joke, around Christmas or something. You'd ask him, what do you want for Christmas? And he'd always say some big outlandish thing. Like, Grampy, what do you want for Christmas? I want a brand new car. Or, I want a boat. Or, I'm sorry. I want me a brand new boat. Something like that. He'd always just joke. He never would actually tell you. But one year we decided to call his bluff. Everybody that asked him that year said, Grampy, what do you want for Christmas? He said, I want me a brand new 4-wheeler. Knowing good and well, at that point, he was in no shape to be out there riding no 4-wheeler. Well, or at least he thought so. Turned out, he said he told us later he was expecting. They gave him this little box for Christmas. They said, "There you go, here's a little bitty box." He said he was expecting to open it and find like a little Tonka truck or a little Tonka toy 4-wheeler. It was a set of keys. They bought that man a brand new 4-wheeler. He never did that again. After that, when you asked him, he'd tell you. But to be honest, he enjoyed that 4-wheeler though. I don't know who enjoyed it more, him or the grandkids. But he did get out there and ride it some. He didn't do anything rough with it, but he could get out there and ride it up and down their dirt roads and stuff. He did end up enjoying that 4-wheeler. But anyway, that's just one of many stories about my grandfather. I miss him. He passed in 1997. I'll always miss him. So to my grandfather, I'll just say his nickname here, Terry. There's your Grampy. I love you. I miss you. And I'll see you when I get there.